How's it going, YouTube? Coming at you today with another video, and today guys, what to bring to you is the YCS meta. The YCS is going to be so much fun, and there's so many different decks out there that can do well, and a lot that you may not have played against. So today we're going to be focusing really hard on reminders, exactly what these decks do, and how to counter them. Also, what are going to be the most prevalent decks that we're going to see this weekend. So I do hope that this information does help, because every single time there's an event, especially right when a ban list drops, it gets pretty crazy. So I just want to hope to clear up some of that confusion. So if you haven't already been over to the IMPERIUM Duelist store, definitely go over there, check it out, use code GGYGO10. And if you haven't already heard, we do have a new sponsor on the channel, and that is Dragon Shield. I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much for this opportunity. So amazing that I have you as a sponsor now for the channel, as well as IMPERIUM Duelist. I'm very excited to have this as a opportunity too, and you know, just thank you so much for that. It's honestly just so incredible. But without further ado, let's hop right into the video. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is going to be the protected combos. So we see this a lot in Theory and Punk, we see this in Sun Avalon, and what have you. There's a lot of different decks that are utilizing these cards to really make sure that their crazy combos go through. And the coolest part about those combos is that they really don't need a lot to go off. The Theory and Punk deck only needs E-Telly plus a discard. The Sun Avalon deck only needs Lokai. So there's a lot of really cool opportunities for these decks to do well this weekend because of the fact that they have the protection to go off. The other thing that I would say is that you really have to prepare for dealing with a Omni or two and expecting to have like the two hand traps like we're used to. Even a couple of formats ago where we're saying, like, you know, it's two hand traps or you lose. And sometimes that's just how the game is. But this is one of those times where if you don't want to lose to these big combos, you either have to have two hand traps or crazy board breaks to really make sure that you can answer these boards. Even Sun Avalon, they still have Bloom set, but a lot of times if you have things like a Dark Ruler, it can be curtains pretty fast. So you really want to make sure that you are taking one of the two approaches to this current meta and making sure that you have a way to answer these bigger boards. I want to talk for a moment though about like what decks do we expect to see as like the better decks this format, and especially at this YCS. So the first one that I want to talk about is actually just going to be Sun Avalon. Sun Avalon, again, just very strong, being able to put up an Omni negate. The only thing it needs to go off is the Lokai. The end board gets pretty big. Usually it's like one of the negates through the Griffin or the Regulus or both. And then they have the Drytenary with the Bloom, and they also have the Bang Lancer, and then sometimes even the Teardrop Ricka Queen. And so that's a lot to play through. So you really have to make sure that you are prepared to beat this deck, honestly, because it's going to be very prevalent. Also, sowing itself here, a lot of people don't know this, but if it's in the graveyard, and if a plant link monster be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this instead. So it has a lot of protection. It's very similar to how like Despia has protection too by like opening. It's just kind of like the forgotten effect in the graveyard that a lot of people tend to play into. So the other thing too is when you play against a deck like this and you want to be able to like crash over their board, you got to make sure that if the Theory and Field Spells face up, that you're dealing with that first, because otherwise you just net them free advantage, and that's something that you really don't want to do. The next deck that we have here is Fluanderies, and this is a deck that I really would have to say that you got to respect at this event, because this deck is still absolutely crazy. Even with Banshee and Zombie World and everyone's sideboard, this is a deck that will just push through if you don't have it. If you have it, that's one thing, but especially the fact that a lot of Fluanderies players just realize now, it's kind of like with Striker versus IO, that you just gotta side in Twins and Cosmics going second, because if you don't, then you just have the ability to outright lose to things like Zombie World. So this is where the deck is really able to side a lot of back row hate, a lot of board breaks like Evenly Matched and Dark Ruler, and I just feel like it's just very versatile, and especially being able to put up the Wind Barrier statue after it even cracks the board a little bit is still very detrimental to whatever your strategy could be, especially if you can't deal with the Wind Barrier statue. So this is something that we definitely will end up still seeing very prevalent in this meta in this format. The next deck here is going to be ABC. I think that ABC has a ton of potential to do very, very well in this YCS. And that's because not only is Therian a Omni negate for them, but it's also an extender. Because the second that you target a piece in the graveyard, the piece can then summon itself off of the Therian. So that's really strong for this deck as well, as the fact that the board that puts up isn't even that crazy. It can put up like a Regulus with like an IP and a Dragon Buster, but that's still a lot to play through. And the fact that like the Dragon Buster can tag out, and then you get all the effects of the pieces the second that they get dealt with. So there's a lot to really understand about this matchup and how to play through it and how to play around it. The next set of decks here, I would say that Eldritch Still very, very prevalent, whether it's the branded Eldritch variant or if it's the Trap Eldritch variant. Both are going to be very prevalent at this event, and I just want you to make sure that you have some kind of backer out for this deck, because again, they're going to have those skill drains, those floodgates that we all know and love. So you got to make sure that you have a way to play around them. The next deck here is going to be Despia. Of course, this is one that everyone has their eyes on right now. Same as Sword Soul, as being two of the best decks of the meta at the moment. So you just got to make sure that you have these in the back of your mind whenever you're deck building. And you also have to make sure that if you have a matchup that's just actually terrible for you, you might want to cater your side or even your main deck just a little bit to make sure that you have an edge in those matchups as well. Moving past these though, a lot of people have been asking me, you know, like, hey, is this a break my board format? Do we need a ton of hand traps like you see here? And I feel like it's a yes and a no question, because there are some decks right now that are putting out some pretty crazy boards. The Therian Punk deck, the Sun Avalon deck, even the Despia deck being able to put up like the branded in red, the branded Banishment, the Dragostapelia with the Mirror Jade, like it can still end up being a pretty daunting board to deal with. So where break my board isn't necessarily what I would call it, I would say that just be prepared with either a lot of hand traps or some way to break a board. Now, talking about breaking a board, are board breakers good this format? And I feel like the answer to that is still yes, because especially evenly matched is just so insane right now, because it just answers so many of the decks in the current format. And the Sun Avalon deck, it doesn't even put up like Omni negates. It's only the outside of the engine Omni negates, right? So like if you have an Imperm, an Anchor, or something to do with like the Regulus, if you can deal with the Griffin, cards like evenly matched really do go in against those decks, because usually what it is they have like the Bang Lancer, the Dry Tenary with the Trap, they have the Teardrop, and either the Griffin negate or they'll have the Regulus negate. So as long as you can answer one of those, the evenly matched is something that really does just destroy the board. Same with Dark Ruler, honestly. That deck really can't deal with Dark Ruler as well. The same thing goes with like Lightning Storm against all the back row decks. You just got to be really mindful of when people are playing the Heavenly Prison. I still think that Lightning Storm is very good against decks like Despia though, because it makes cards like Super Poly really good. Since you clear out their Branded in Red and Banishment, they're going to extend off those plays and commit another monster to the board. And then when you Super Poly them, they don't have another way to get another monster on board. Maybe like Masquerade Effect in the graveyard, but that's about it. So I think that this card really does make an opening in that deck as well. So it's just another one to consider as another board break to use this format. I personally still really enjoy evenly matched, because even if the board is just Chi Shao plus Blackout, you're still making them put the Blackout face down in their banish pile, which is very important, because later on they can't just go tie a banish Blackout for cost and still get a token anyway. Usually if you just had the Imperm at that point, it's GG. So for me, I really like this as a card, because even the very simple niche interactions with that are still very important in my opinion. So kind of moving away from these, I want to talk about the cards that we really have to think about playing around this format. That's going to be Droll and Nibiru. I think that these are so important right now to keep in mind, because Droll alone shuts down the Sun Avalon deck and the Therian Punk deck, and then it just overall hits a lot of decks right now too. Same with the Rock, and that's something where a lot of people really want to play things like Salamangrate right now, but when everyone's main decking or siding Nibiru, you just got to know that you're gonna get hit with it at some point in the tournament, right? So that's where I really do have to say that you got to respect these cards now, because of the fact that they are coming back into the meta. And a lot of us already know when Droll and Nibiru are good, they're very, very good. So just make sure that you're keeping this in mind and you're not just losing to situations that you can avoid. So I want to be able to give you some reminders going into this event, and one of the most forgotten decks I feel like is already Sun Avalon, and so I want to make sure that you are hand trapping this in the right spots. Do not hit Dryas, it's just a waste of a negate, especially if they have any other extender in their hand. You really want to either Ash the Sowing or Imperm the Jasmine. The Jasmine is really crucial here, because if you're able to Imperm, that means they don't have Therian cards yet, and Therian is going to come out of the deck one way or another here through Jasmine. They're either going to summon the Aromage and then double search with the Jasmine and get to Lily there, or they're just going to go ahead and special summon the Lily directly from the deck. So you want to make sure that you are cutting them off at this choke point, because this will get them to an Omni negate as well. So this is, again, just a very, very important spot to be able to stop this deck. The next one that I want to bring up here is going to be the Dynamorphia deck. A lot of people that I've been seeing playing against this deck still have no idea really how to hand trap this or how to get around the deck. just use Ash on the trap cards. Don't use it on anything else. Like even the pot cards, like let them get the pot cards, it's fine. Just use the Ash on the trap cards specifically to make sure that they can't get to their fusion. Their life gets cut in half for cost, and then you Ash the card, and then they have to have the other one to really be able to do anything. So this is just very important. You can also try to use any form of negation on the Kentragina as well. That's the combo that is going to allow them to go ahead and pay 4,000, summon Kentragina, copy the trap in the graveyard, put them down to 2,000, and then summon Rexsturm. So they're now at 2,000, and then you can't activate any monster effects with 2,000 or above, which again is just very important to make sure that you're playing around. But Ash is going to be your best card against this deck. The next deck here is going to be the Styrian Punk deck. Again, going ahead and ashing the Foxy Tune and improving the Chaotic Ruler. These are both very important, as we know, for card advantage, to making sure that they're not getting to their full combos. The Foxy Tune getting ashed means that no Deer Note, and then the Imperm on the Chaotic Ruler means no the card advantage in the graveyard, especially if they're going after their Brave Engine, if they need like the Endless Engine in their graveyard as well. Any Therian cards to mill, maybe they have a Regulus in hand. Just very important interactions overall. The next one that I want to cover here is going to be the fact that there are two different Salamangreat variants that you have to look out for, and both are going to be very unique. One is going to be the standard build that we're used to. That's going to be the Sunlight Wolf with the trap cards already in the deck, like Rivalry, Gozen, and what have you. The other thing that you got to know is that both of these variants are off of Heat Leo, so your back row is going to be pretty safe during these matchups, but you got to make sure that some people might still play it, but the overall consensus is that most Salamangreat decks cut Heat Leo completely. The other variant is going to be really interesting. It's Heat Soul Turbo, and they just play like 20 hand traps. So this is a deck that really does falter, because if you get rid of their Heat Soul, they don't have a lot of engine cards in the deck. And if they can't get to another Salamangreat card to be able to summon and extend with, then the ones in the graveyard, if they don't even have a Face-Up Solar Trap on their board to be able to resummon even like a Foxy, and Foxy alone needs a Salad card in hand just to be able to go off too. This is very important that you just clear the Heat Soul, because even if they have 6 cards in hand, don't scoop, because a lot of times they don't have Engine and they can't extend. So this is something that you really got to look out for. If you just see them playing like the microcoders and they have a lot of hand traps and they're just ending on Heat Soul, this is something where this matchup is very easy to beat. You just have to clear the Heat Soul. Moving past this, ABC. The number one thing they got to know about this matchup is that C is going to be the most crowed target, because they only play 2C. Even if they're playing 3A and 3B, some people play 2A, 2B, and 2C, but usually what you see the most is that the C is the least played one, so they'll play the least of it. So if you're able to crow out both of the C's, this deck just has no way to play the game, because you get rid of their way to actually make the Dragon Buster. As long as you are actively banishing out their C's, they don't have a way to play the game. So this is very important. It's kind of like banishing Array against Striker, you know? You just get rid of the C's as much as possible, and they just can't play the game. Very, very important. The next one too, if you're playing against the Branded Eldritch deck or the Trap Eldritch deck, make sure that you're not playing into Lava Golem. This is very common in their sideboard and something that they're going to be putting in almost always, especially if you're playing a combo deck. So just make sure that you have either a way to play around the Lava Golem, or that you don't commit as hard as you want to into a Lava Golem, and then try to OTK turn 3. I hope that you enjoyed all this information today, because there's a lot of different decks out there, and I want to make sure that you're as prepared as possible for the YCS and all the events coming up. And there are just so many different decks out there to keep track of, it feels like. If you're not already part of my Discord, Twitch, Twitter communities, definitely go down to the link in the description below and find those. And then if you want a coaching session at Metafy, definitely go over to Metafy, check it out. And if you have any questions, PM me on Discord and we'll have a chat about it. I hope that everyone has a great day, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Thank you.